The massive alien ship appeared over New York without warning. It hung in the sky like a metallic cloud, its surface shimmering with strange lights. On the ground, Commander James Miller stood among world leaders, his hand resting nervously on his holstered weapon. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Council representatives. They looked almost like tall praying mantises with smooth green shells and multiple compound eyes. Their translator devices made their clicks and chirps sound like perfect English. "We have been watching your species," the lead alien announced. "Your civilization has achieved sufficient advancement to join the galactic community." Miller noticed how the aliens kept glancing at the human weapons with what seemed like amusement. Their own technology was clearly far more advanced: sleek energy weapons and floating defense screens that made Earth's best military equipment look like toys. During the first official meeting, the Council representatives displayed holographic maps of the galaxy. They showed thousands of civilized worlds, trade routes, and military boundaries. Earth was just a tiny dot on the outer edge of what they called developing space. "Your species will need guidance," one alien said, its antennae twitching. "We have reviewed your military capabilities. Rather basic but acceptable for your development level." Miller felt his face grow hot at their condescending tone. He had served in combat zones across Earth and knew what humans were capable of. But he kept quiet, watching and learning. The aliens classified Earth as a Class 3 civilization, barely above what they considered primitive. They seemed especially amused by human warfare tactics. "You still use explosive projectiles?" one asked, examining a standard military rifle. "How quaint." But Miller noticed something interesting. While the aliens had amazing technology, they fought wars according to strict rules and patterns. Their battles were almost like formal dances, with set moves and countermoves. The concept of guerrilla warfare or adapting civilian tools as weapons seemed foreign to them. During the next few weeks, Earth's government signed treaties and trade agreements. Humans would be allowed to travel in Council space and even participate in minor military operations, though the aliens clearly considered this a joke. "We will, of course, need to install proper monitoring systems," the lead alien explained, "to ensure your species follows proper combat protocols." Miller listened to all this while making his own quiet observations. The aliens had rules for everything, especially warfare. They never considered that humans might think differently about fighting, about survival, about winning at any cost. As the alien ship prepared to leave, carrying Earth's signed treaties, Miller stood with other military leaders watching it rise into the sky. One of the younger officers spoke up. "They don't think much of our fighting abilities, do they, sir?" Miller smiled slightly, remembering human history, how people had turned farming tools into weapons, kitchen chemicals into explosives, and simple radios into military communications. "No, they don't," he said quietly. "And maybe that's not such a bad thing." The alien ship vanished into the clouds, leaving humanity to take its first steps into a larger universe. None of the Council representatives noticed the thoughtful look in Miller's eyes, or suspected that their dismissal of human warfare might be the biggest mistake they'd ever made. 3 months after first contact, the Galactic Council sent their military experts to Earth. They arrived in a sleek vessel that looked more like art than a warship. Miller watched from the observation deck as 5 alien specialists, each from different species, began their evaluation of human military capabilities. The head evaluator, a tall being with crystalline features, started with Earth's naval forces. "Your vessels still use water for transport?" it asked, crystal fragments tinkling in what seemed like laughter. "How do you manage in space?" Miller simply nodded and continued the tour. He noticed how the aliens paid little attention to what they called primitive aspects, things like hand-to-hand combat training or survival skills. They seemed more interested in counting weapons and measuring explosive yields. During the assessment of an army training facility, something unexpected happened. A group of soldiers was running an obstacle course, using whatever they could find to complete their mission. One soldier turned his belt into a tool for climbing, while another used her boot laces to rig a pulley system. Most irregular, muttered a squid-like alien observer, writing something in its floating datapad. They'd modify their equipment without authorization. The evaluation continued at a weapons testing range. The aliens watched as human soldiers demonstrated various firearms. What caught their attention wasn't the weapons themselves, but how quickly humans could strip, modify, and repair them. Your species seems unusually focused on weapon maintenance, noted a bird-like alien. Our troops simply replaced malfunctioning equipment. Miller didn't mention that this habit came from centuries of soldiers having to fix their weapons in the field with whatever they had on hand. The final test was a simulated combat scenario. The aliens expected to see standard military formations and traditional tactics. Instead, they watched in confusion as human troops used the environment, improvised tools, and unorthodox strategies to complete their mission. "This is not proper military procedure," the crystal alien declared, clearly disturbed. "Your troops show dangerous levels of individual initiative." One of the alien observers turned to Miller. "Why do you train them to think independently? It disrupts unit cohesion." Miller thought carefully before answering. "We find it useful when things don't go according to plan." The evaluation team spent hours arguing among themselves. Finally, they'd made their decision. Earth's military forces were officially classified as Class 3, suitable only for minor peacekeeping roles under strict supervision. As the alien team prepared to leave, the crystalline leader approached Miller one last time. "We have determined your species needs significant guidance before participating in galactic warfare. Your methods are chaotic, unpredictable, and lack proper structure." Miller maintained a neutral expression. "We understand. We have much to learn." What he didn't say was that human history was filled with victories by forces that were supposedly primitive or untrained. The aliens saw chaos where humans saw adaptation, weakness where humans saw strength. As the assessment ship departed, Miller smiled. The aliens had counted Earth's weapons but missed its most dangerous asset, the human ability to turn anything into a weapon. Their detailed report would tell the Council everything about Earth's military capability, except what really mattered. The real evaluation, Miller knew, would come later, when humans finally saw actual combat in space. The first real test of human combat capabilities came 6 months later. A border dispute broke out between two minor alien species over a small mining colony. The Council, still amused by humans, decided to let a small human contingent participate as combat observers. Miller led a team of 50 soldiers to the disputed planet. Their equipment was basic by galactic standards: simple protective suits and standard rifles modified to work in alien atmospheres. The Council representatives assigned them to guard a non-critical supply depot, far from the expected fighting. "Stay here, observe proper combat protocols, and try not to break anything," the Council commander told them, its tentacles waving dismissively. Miller's team watched as the two alien forces engaged in what looked like a carefully choreographed dance. They exchanged energy blasts at predetermined ranges, moved in standard formations, and followed strict rules of engagement. It was less like a battle and more like a complex game of chess. Then everything changed. A third group, space pirates, attacked both sides simultaneously. The pirates didn't follow any rules. The organized alien defenses began to crumble. The Council commander's voice crackled over the communication system. "All units maintain position and await proper counterattack protocols." Miller watched as the pirates moved closer to the supply depot. He knew those supplies were actually critical for the colony's survival. Making a quick decision, he turned to his team. "Let's show them how humans guard a position." What happened next shocked every alien observer. The human soldiers scattered, using the terrain in ways no one expected. They dug holes and covered them, creating instant traps. They rigged supply containers to explode when tampered with. Some soldiers covered themselves with local mud to blend in with the environment. The pirates, expecting standard resistance, walked right into the human defenses. They found themselves caught in a nightmare of guerrilla tactics. Every piece of terrain seemed to hide a human soldier. Every abandoned position was a trap. This is not authorized combat methodology. The council commander screeched over the comm system. But it worked. The pirates, faced with an enemy they couldn't predict, quickly retreated. The supply depot and the colony's survival was secured. In the aftermath, alien observers gathered around the human position, examining their improvised defenses with a mixture of horror and fascination. "You modified the terrain without permission," one stated, poking at a camouflaged fighting position. "You altered standard equipment," another noted, looking at the makeshift traps. "You abandoned formation protocols," a third added, still shocked. Miller just shrugged. "We protected the objective." The council representatives huddled together, discussing in their own languages. Finally, they announced that while the humans had achieved their goal, their methods were disturbing and required further review. As Miller's team packed up their gear, he overheard two alien soldiers talking. "Did you see how they fought?" one asked. "Like they didn't know the rules." "Or worse," the other replied, "like they didn't care about rules at all." The human soldiers boarded their transport back to Earth, leaving behind a group of very unsettled aliens. The council had just glimpsed something they didn't understand. A species that saw combat not as a formal exercise, but as something to be won by any means necessary. The passenger transport, Star Wanderer, was supposed to be an easy target. It was just a simple ship carrying human colonists to their new home, and the space pirates had disabled its main weapons with their first strike. The pirates, led by the notorious Captain Glix, expected the usual response: surrender and compliance. They were wrong. As the pirates' boarding pods latched onto the ship's hull, Miller watched from the bridge where he'd been traveling as a civilian passenger. The ship's captain looked at him desperately. "We have no weapons. Council regulations forbid armed passenger vessels." Miller picked up the ship's announcement system. "Attention all passengers. Remember Earth's history. Remember what we learned about ship battles in school." The pirates burst through the airlocks, expecting to find cowering passengers. Instead, they found corridors transformed into death traps. The human passengers had raided the kitchen and maintenance sections during the 5 minutes since the attack began. In the cargo hold, pirates screamed as they were hit with makeshift flamethrowers made from cleaning sprays and emergency lighters. In the dining hall, they faced a barrage of silverware launched from improvised rubber band catapults. The ship's hot water pipes had been rerouted to spray superheated steam into selected corridors. "This is impossible," Captain Glix shouted as his boarding parties reported chaos. "They're unarmed civilians." A group of pirates trying to reach the bridge found the corridor filled with cooking oil. As they slipped and fell, emergency lights strobed in their eyes, and the humans attacked with makeshift clubs made from furniture legs. Miller led a group of passengers wearing makeshift armor crafted from seat cushions and carrying improvised spears made from broken pipes. They moved through the ship's maintenance tunnels, attacking the pirates from unexpected angles. "They're everywhere," a pirate screamed over the comm. "They're using the ventilation shafts." The ship's artificial gravity suddenly switched off in sections where pirates were gathered, then slammed back on at double strength, crushing them to the floor. A group of teenage passengers had hacked the ship's environmental controls using gaming tablets. Captain Glix, watching his forces fall apart, made a fatal mistake. He threatened to breach the hull unless the humans surrendered. The response was immediate. Every passenger put on their emergency spacesuits and kept fighting. "What kind of species continues to fight in vacuum?" Glix screamed. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When Council peacekeepers finally arrived, responding to the distress call, they found the pirate force completely defeated. The human passengers had captured 3 boarding pods and were preparing to assault the pirate mothership. The Council investigators couldn't believe their reports. The humans had suffered no casualties. The pirates were all either captured or had retreated. The ship's interior looked like a war zone filled with improvised weapons that the Council's experts couldn't even classify. These were civilians, the lead investigator asked Miller. Not military personnel. Just regular passengers, Miller replied. Though I think there was a high school history teacher among them. She knew a lot about ancient naval warfare. The investigator's report sent shockwaves through the Council. If human civilians with no weapons could defeat armed pirates, what were human soldiers capable of? More importantly, what kind of species taught warfare in their schools? The Council began to worry they had severely underestimated humanity. The war between the Trade Federation and the mining consortium caught everyone by surprise. Two of the galaxy's largest alliances were suddenly at each other's throats over resource-rich territories. The Council faced a problem. Traditional combat protocols weren't working. Both sides were losing ships and soldiers at an alarming rate. In desperation, they turned to humanity. "We require your unique capabilities," the Council leader told Miller, its metallic skin reflecting the starlight. "You will serve as auxiliary troops." Miller now stood on the bridge of an alien warship, watching his human soldiers prepare for their first major space battle. The alien commander had given them what he considered outdated equipment, expecting them to serve as a simple distraction. Remember, the alien commander instructed, follow standard combat protocols and an enemy fleet appeared on their scanners, interrupting his speech. The battle began traditionally enough. Energy beams crossed space in predictable patterns. Ships moved in standard formations. Then the humans joined in. Instead of following protocols, human ships scattered in random patterns. They flew into debris fields that the aliens considered too dangerous to enter. They turned their ships' mining lasers, meant for cutting asteroids, into makeshift weapons. What are they doing? The alien commander demanded as human ships started using chunks of space debris as shields. This isn't in any combat manual. But it worked. The enemy fleet, programmed to respond to standard tactics, couldn't adapt fast enough. Human gunners, trained in leading moving targets from video games, scored hits that alien targeting computers said were impossible. Then Miller unveiled their secret weapon. His engineers had modified their ship's cargo holds to release clouds of metallic dust. The enemy's energy weapons ignited this dust, creating chains of explosions that disrupted their formations. "This is barbaric," the alien commander protested. "You're using industrial materials as weapons." Miller watched as human ships performed maneuvers that the alien safety protocols wouldn't even allow them to attempt. They flew through their own explosion clouds, using the chaos as cover. They turned off their safety systems to achieve speeds that made the alien crew sick just watching. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, the enemy fleet had retreated in confusion. The alien commander stared at Miller with all 4 of his eyes. "Your species," he said slowly, "fights like you're trying to survive." "Isn't that what fighting is about?" Miller asked. "No, it's about following proper combat procedures and—" The commander stopped, realizing how hollow that sounded after their victory. News of the battle spread quickly through Council space. Some called it a fluke. Others demanded investigations into human combat methods. But military leaders on both sides of the conflict noticed one thing. Humans got results. More requests for human troops followed. Earth's soldiers were deployed across the galaxy, officially as auxiliary forces, but actually as shock troops. Every battle they fought changed how the aliens viewed warfare. As Miller prepared reports for the Council, he knew they still didn't understand. The aliens saw war as a civilized exchange of fire, a game with rules. Humans saw it as survival, where victory was the only rule that mattered. And that difference was about to change galactic warfare forever. The war had dragged on for months when Miller noticed a change in the alien commanders. They had stopped giving orders to the human troops and started asking for suggestions. The reason was simple. Humans were winning battles. But it wasn't just their combat tactics that disturbed the aliens anymore. It was what humans were doing to their equipment. In a maintenance bay on the front lines, alien observers watched in horror as human engineers took apart advanced energy weapons and reassembled them in ways their creators never intended. You can't modify Class A plasma rifles. An alien weapons inspector protested. The design is perfect as it is. The human engineer didn't even look up. If we reverse the cooling system and override the safety protocols, we can triple its power output. But it might explode. Only if we miss, the engineer replied with a grin. Similar scenes played out across the fleet. Humans turned ship maintenance tools into anti-boarding weapons. They reprogrammed cleaning robots to act as mobile bombs. Even their entertainment systems were converted into electronic warfare devices. The final straw came during the Battle of Three Moons. Miller's forces were outnumbered and outgunned. The enemy fleet expected an easy victory. Instead, they faced humanity's most terrifying weapon, psychological warfare. Human ships broadcast images of Earth's most brutal historical battles on all frequencies. They played recordings of predator sounds mixed with human battle cries. Every enemy communication channel was filled with horror movie soundtracks. "They're attacking our minds," an enemy commander reported before retreating. But what truly broke the aliens' understanding of warfare was discovering that humans had turned the battlefield itself into a weapon. They had spent weeks seeding the area with tiny mirrors, turning the entire space into a maze of reflected sensor readings. "This isn't warfare," the enemy admiral complained to the council. "They're changing the rules of reality." Miller stood before the council after the battle, defending his tactics. "We achieved victory with minimal casualties on both sides," he explained. "By terrorizing the enemy into retreat," a council member shouted, "by making them fear shadows." "Fear is more effective than bullets," Miller replied quietly. "Always has been." The council chambers erupted in argument. Some praised the humans' effectiveness. Others demanded their immediate removal from all combat zones. But everyone agreed on one thing. Humans had changed the nature of galactic warfare forever. In their quarters that night, Miller's troops celebrated another victory. They didn't see their actions as revolutionary. To them, it was just warfare as humanity had always waged it, using every available tool, adapting every piece of technology, and never, ever fighting fair. "Sir," one of his officers asked, "do you think they'll let us keep fighting?" Miller looked out at the stars. He remembered how the aliens had first dismissed humans as primitive. Now they watched human soldiers with a mixture of fear and awe. Their perfect protocols and civilized warfare had crumbled in the face of humanity's raw survival instinct. "They might not have a choice," he answered. "We're too good at what we do." He didn't know it then, but he was right. Humanity's effectiveness at warfare would soon force the Council to make a decision that would change the galaxy forever. The Council's investigation team arrived without warning. They weren't military observers this time, but scientists, historians, and behavior experts from a dozen different species. Their mission: understand how humans waged war. They started by examining Earth's military bases. The alien experts expected to find dedicated weapon factories and combat training facilities. Instead, they found something far more disturbing. Your civilian manufacturing plants can be converted to military production in hours. A squid-like researcher asked, its tentacles twitching nervously as it studied Earth's industrial capabilities. "Of course," the factory manager replied. "We've always built them that way." The investigation moved to a children's playground. The alien observers watched in growing horror as kids played games like Capture the Flag and Laser Tag. "These are combat training simulations," one alien noted shakily in its report. "No," Miller corrected. "They're just games." But the aliens didn't believe him. They saw military training everywhere they looked. Soccer taught squad tactics. Chess taught strategy. Video games trained hand-eye coordination and tactical thinking. In a civilian kitchen, an alien food expert lifted a common knife. This is a food preparation tool. Yes, Miller answered. But it can also be a weapon. Anything can be a weapon, Miller said simply. That statement sent shockwaves through the investigation team. They began cataloging everyday human items, horrified to find that nearly everything had dual purposes. Tools could be weapons. Vehicles could be armored. Even children's toys could be used for military purposes. The historical research was even worse. The aliens discovered that humans had been waging war since before they had written language. Every major human advancement, from metalworking to nuclear power, had military applications. Your species developed spaceflight to explore and to gain military advantage. An alien historian asked, its crystalline form clouding with distress. We developed everything for multiple purposes, Miller explained. It's how we think. The investigation team's final discovery broke their understanding completely. They found that humans didn't have separate military and civilian technology. Almost everything humans built could serve both purposes. In their final report to the Council, the investigation team wrote, "The humans do not prepare for war. They live in a constant state of war readiness without even realizing it. Their children play at war. Their civilians think like soldiers. Their tools are weapons. Their weapons are improved tools." The report continued, "Most disturbing of all, they show no signs of changing. This is not a military society. This is their society. They have transformed their entire civilization into a self-sustaining war machine that doesn't even recognize itself as such." Miller read a copy of the report and understood what the aliens couldn't. Humans hadn't built their society for war. They had built it for survival. The ability to adapt, to use tools in new ways, to think creatively in dangerous situations. These weren't military traits. They were human traits. But as he watched the investigation team's ship depart, he knew the Council would never understand this. They saw only the military potential in everything humans did, and that frightened them more than any weapon ever could. The Emergency Council session had been running for 3 Earth days straight. Representatives from every major galactic civilization gathered to review the human investigation findings. Miller stood before them, feeling like a specimen under a microscope. "Explain these action movies to us again," demanded the Council leader. "You claim they are entertainment, not combat training videos." "They're just stories," Miller replied. "Fiction. Make-believe." The Council chamber erupted in confused chirps and clicks. The alien representatives couldn't grasp how humans could find combat entertaining. But that wasn't what truly terrified them. A holographic display activated, showing scenes from Earth's daily life. A chef flipping a knife with practiced skill. A farmer repairing complex machinery alone in a field. A child taking apart and rebuilding a toy. "Your entire species possesses this." "Adaptive thinking?" asked a Serpentine Council member. "Most of us, yes," Miller answered. "We call it human ingenuity." The Council shared worried looks. They had discovered that humans didn't just adapt weapons. They adapted everything. Every human, from children to elderly, knew how to improvise, repair, and repurpose tools. "Show us the historical record again," the Council leader commanded. The hologram changed to show human warfare through the ages, stone tools becoming weapons, farming tools becoming combat implements, industrial machines converted to build tanks and planes. "Your species has never created a purely civilian technology," stated a crystalline being, its voice trembling. "Everything you build can become a weapon." Miller tried to explain. "We build things to be useful. Sometimes being useful means being deadly," interrupted another Council member. "Your race's creativity is inherently linked to warfare." The evidence mounted. Human sports taught combat skills. Human games developed strategic thinking. Even human music could be used to coordinate troops or demoralize enemies. Then came the final revelation. An alien anthropologist presented their study of human children. They naturally form teams, create rules, and simulate conflict, the anthropologist explained. showing footage of kids playing war games. They instinctively practice warfare patterns. Those are just games, Miller protested again. No, the council leader replied gravely. Those are the seeds of combat excellence. Your children play at war because war is integral to your species' thinking. The council chamber fell silent as the full implications sank in. Humans didn't need military training to be dangerous. Their entire civilization was built on principles that made them natural warriors: adaptability, creativity, and the ability to turn anything into a weapon. Do you understand now? Asked the council leader. Your species doesn't practice warfare. You live it. Every human is a potential soldier. Every tool is a potential weapon. Every civilian is a potential warrior. Miller looked at the worried alien faces surrounding him. They had finally understood something about humanity that even humans sometimes forgot. Humans hadn't become good at warfare through training or technology. They were good at warfare because they were good at surviving. And to humans, those were the same thing. The council's worst fears had been confirmed. Humanity wasn't just another species that could wage war. They were a species that could turn anything and anyone into a weapon of war. And that realization would lead to the most dramatic decision in council history. The final council session began with an atmosphere of tense silence. Representatives from all galactic civilizations had gathered for what they called the human problem. Miller stood at the center, representing Earth. The council leader's voice echoed through the chamber. We have reviewed all evidence regarding human involvement in galactic warfare. Our decision is unanimous. Large screens displayed images of human combat innovations, converted civilian ships, modified weapons, improvised tactics that broke every rule of civilized warfare. Humanity is hereby classified as an apocalyptic risk species, the council leader announced. All human participation in galactic military operations is now forbidden. Murmurs filled the chamber. This was only the third time in galactic history that a species had received this classification. You fear us that much? Miller asked quietly. Fear you? A reptilian council member leaned forward. We've seen how your children turn toys into weapons, how your civilians think like soldiers, how your engineers transform tools into arms. Yes, we fear you. The ban was comprehensive. No human could participate in any military operation. No human could modify military equipment. No human could even consult on military matters. But then something unexpected happened. A small insectoid being stepped forward. My species requests permission to study human defensive techniques, it announced. Others followed. Soon, half the council was requesting permission to learn from humanity, not for war, they claimed, but for cultural research. The council leader's color shifted to deep purple with alarm. You wish to study the very methods we're banning. They won't stop being effective just because we ban them, replied an avian representative. We should learn to defend against them. Miller hid a smile. The aliens still didn't understand. They couldn't ban human thinking. They couldn't ban human creativity. They couldn't ban the very things that made humans dangerous in the first place. The council's final declaration was a compromise. Humans were banned from all military operations, but civilian cultural exchange was permitted, under strict supervision. As Miller prepared to leave the chamber, the council leader pulled him aside. You understand why we had to do this? It asked. Miller nodded. We're too unpredictable, too adaptable, too willing to break the rules. No, the leader corrected. It's because you don't see them as rules at all. You see them as suggestions, and that terrifies us more than any weapon ever could. Back on Earth, Miller delivered the council's decision to world leaders, but he also shared what he'd observed. How the other species had immediately started looking for ways to study human methods, how they'd begun questioning their own rigid military traditions. They banned us from their wars, he concluded, but they can't ban what we've taught them. The galaxy will never be the same. Years later, Miller would note how galactic warfare had changed. Species began fighting more creatively, more adaptively. They started using civilian technology in military ways. They began breaking the old rules. The humans were banned from galactic warfare, but their influence lived on. They had shown the galaxy a new way of thinking, a new way of fighting, a new way of surviving. And that, Miller realized, was humanity's real victory.